So over the years there have been many types of synthesizer designs. The most modern things like this. I mean, I know this is a controller, but you can shape various aspects of your sounds, new flashing lights and dials and all that. And what a synthesizer does, well, synthesis, synthetic, it's a way of creating a musical timbre through artificial means. That applies to every musical instrument that's ever been devised, even those that don't use electronics. So very early electronics was things like the Hammond organ, which was designed as a problem solver, actually, to essentially allow a church organ to be moved about, and it was an electronic version of that. And then came things like this, which is the more modern emulator of the original Hammond organ, and then from this it's gone on to iOS and computer programs, etc. So all of these things have been designed essentially to copy the thing that came before it. So it's just problem solving. It's how to make things smaller, lighter, more affordable, more portable, etc. Now, there is no such thing as a natural musical instrument, and that includes this. Now, this is an emulator of the only natural musical instrument that exists, and that's the human voice. This is a human voice synthesizer, and in fact this one really is for the female vocal. If you want male vocal, play cello. So, if I sing a line, la la la, they're not that far apart in timbre. So when you're playing the violin, it's a good idea to keep the human voice in mind. You want to try and emulate somebody singing. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep theory to a minimum, because actually it's something that you can learn as you play. You begin to then understand the abstract nature of theory. Music is a completely abstract concept. The fact that we've got 12 semitones in an octave, it's all made up. So I'm going to start by playing just some open strings with the bow. So making sure that you've tightened the bow up so that you've got about ½ an inch between the hair and the wood, less than at the end, so that the bow maintains a sort of concave shape. So I'm going to just draw the bow across an open string. Notice that the bow remains at right angles to the strings, regardless of where I am. Now that's achieved through the use of treating your wrist and your elbow as kind of universal joints that are working in reverse, like that, to keep the bow straight. If I move my upper arm, that means the bow's going to go everywhere, like that, and you don't want that. So your upper arm must stay as still as you can make it. Of course, it's all connected, so it's going to move a bit, but try and keep the movement to a minimum. And you should be able to get the same timbre wherever you are in the bow. So to start with, forget about playing right at the extremes, maybe, because it's a little bit trickier to get a consistent sound in these areas. Just work with the middle bit. Now, the balance of the bow is achieved by using all 4 fingers across the top with your thumb underneath. So you put your thumb underneath the wood here. You can see where I've worn a bit of this black stuff off with my thumb over the years. So put the thumb in there, and then my little finger on the where you tighten the bow up, and then my index finger on the black bit there. And then my other 2 fingers just hang over the top of the bow like that. So you end up with something like that. Also, turn the bow slightly towards you instead of away from you. The way that you stand with a violin, if you turn the bow away from you, it might slide down the strings like that. So you need to turn the bow slightly towards you so that the hair is closer to you than the wood. Not too much, but just a bit. And then you regulate the loudness of your note in a few different ways. Generally speaking, if you draw the bow across faster, you're more likely to get a louder sound, but you can draw it across quickly with very little pressure here. to get a quiet note, or you can get slightly louder sound with the bow slower by applying more pressure here. Now with the speed of the bow, you want to try and keep it constant, otherwise you end up with this. Where if you arrest the movement of the bow, it'll stop the string from vibrating properly. Nice. Okay. So the pressure is regulated by this finger and this finger as well. So you end up with a balance like that. So scale time, left hand. There are no markings on here at all, as you would find on a guitar where you've got fret positions which show you where to put your fingers. So that's a bit of an issue, but we've all been brought up with the Western classical tradition. And EastEnders, being the most watched programme on BBC One, has its theme with the first 6 notes of a major scale. There's the first notes of any major scale. So I'm going to play a D major scale. If that sounds right to you, you are playing a major scale and therefore you're getting your fingers in the right place. You can get little grids which stick onto the fingerboard, but the problem with that is that you're looking down a string like that. It's very hard to see where you are with the left hand. Consequently, you should try and avoid looking at your left hand, only concentrate on your bow. The reason for that is that then your ears pay more attention to the pitch of the sound you're getting. So, I've just played a D major scale. So, my finger positions are first finger, second finger, and then the third finger goes right next to the second finger like that. And then on the next string, I did exactly the same. So, I was working on the middle 2 strings, starting with the D string, which is the third one there. And there we go. You can check the tuning sometimes. When you go between the 2 strings, it will sound off if you've got the intervals wrong of the notes. Sounds wrong, doesn't it? That's better. Now, violin it's quite tricky to keep in tune, and tiny little adjustments here do change the pitches of the notes. But your ear gradually gets used to that, and you use your ear to correct where your finger goes. So rather than thinking about in terms of, oh yes, that that note is let's see, that's 3.4 centimeters. Don't think in those terms. Just think in terms of how your ear perceives those notes. Sometimes if you've got a piano, that can help. If you just play 2 notes on the piano and try and get the same 2 notes on the violin. It's worth also listening to a major scale as much as you can. I'm sure somebody's put a major scale up on YouTube for people to hear. You just go major scale and one will come up, I'm sure. And then you can get used to the sound of that scale and the distances between the notes. So the distances between the notes in a scale are known as steps and half steps. In a major scale, you end up with 2 steps and then a half step, which is why your third finger is closer to your second finger than the second to the first or the first to the open string. So we end up between the first note and the second note is a step. Between the second note and the third note is also a step. Then we get a half step between the third and the fourth. Like that. So you can see that this distance here is basically half what this was. Now, from a left-hand perspective, from your posture, from your positioning of your left hand, you don't want this where the wrist is collapsed like that. You need to ideally draw a curve from fingertip right to your elbow, like this, so that you end up because your hand is stronger that way. Also, if you don't press the notes down hard enough on this hand, you get this. So a good note is this. A note that's not so nice is this. Because the string isn't able to vibrate because it's kind of hanging in mid-air. You've got to press the string down so that it touches this piece of wood here. And this is ebony, which is one of the hardest woods you can get. So that's why the string will vibrate when it touches that ebony. Slightly dodgy in tone there. Now, with the bow, sets your teeth on edge when you play right next to the bridge. It's called sul ponticello. It's a technique that just makes the tone sound really harsh. Ideally halfway between the fingerboard and the bridge. Again, don't worry about whether it's halfway or 3/8 and 5/8. Doesn't matter, as long as the tone that you're getting satisfies your ear. So you're thinking back to your singing, thinking back to that sonorous quality of maybe a mezzo soprano or something singing. Now, we've got in the left hand, there are various techniques for expression. When you hear a singer singing, there will be vibrato, la, la, which is minute variations in pitch. Now, this takes a while to master, but I thought I'd mention it here anyway, just so that you know what it is when you're listening to a violinist and you think, how are they getting that sound? The answer is you're moving the finger like that. So the finger is essentially in one position, but you're turning your finger, you're rotating the fingertip along the fingerboard, which gives you this sound. Now, it can be quite subtle, but it still gives it a nice quality. Now, modern synthesizers of the violin actually aren't that great because there are so many ways of playing this. And so many variations in tone that you can get, which is what makes this really special. So have a go with that D major scale, and in the next lesson we'll go through some other keys and also using the outer two strings.